Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode is one I've actually been looking forward to for a bit now, and finally I will be able to speak of it. And it's actually very interesting given the day I'm recording this, but we'll get to that when we get to that. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, Heather Bresch, Joe Manchin's daughter, played a direct role in EpiPen price inflation scandal. Heather Bresch, the former president and CEO of the drug maker Mylan, worked directly with the CEO of Pfizer to keep prices of the company's EpiPen products artificially high, according to new documents released as part of an ongoing lawsuit. The documents also show Bresch approving a scheme to force customers captured by the company's monopoly to purchase 2 EpiPens at once, regardless of medical need. The EpiPen is an auto-injectable device. Yeah, we know what an EpiPen is. The documents were released as part of an ongoing antitrust suit in the federal court. In June, Judge Daniel Crabtree issued a summary judgment, partially siding with Mylan and partially siding with the plaintiffs, meaning the case goes on. So, yeah, that's definitely a thing that is legal for it to happen. The fact that that is very legal to happen in every stretch of the word is just a failure. The fact that a senator's daughter can be like the head of like a drug company while their father is part of the Senate and gets to write the laws, that's screwed up. The fact that she was willing to do all this is very screwed up. But the fact that all of this is just okay to do in America is just stupid. It's just, I don't even understand why that's a thing that can happen. It's one of those things you legitimately are so perplexed by. Like the idea like someone would turn away a person in need of medical care. Just like, that seems impossible, but it's a thing that's just very possible in the United States. Okay, so there's not much I could say on that story for the time being, so let's move on to a smaller, obviously less important story, but still otherwise important. An internal poll shows that the Senate candidate in Wisconsin, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, holds a 29-point lead in his state's Democratic Senate primary. Now, again, we should preface this is a poll that is being done very early on and is a Mandela Barnes sponsored poll, but this definitely does and there's one more thing. It's like, obviously he's just a more well-known figure, so of course he's going to be higher polling, but I like seeing it, because Mandela Barnes is a really good candidate, and obviously him being the senator from Wisconsin would be a very good thing. A bring back to the La Follette Feingold days. But similarly, there's not much else I can say at that particular moment, because it's a little bit until 2022, so maybe things could change. Speaking of change, let's talk about Mexico for a little bit. Mexico has done a very interesting thing. Mexico's Supreme Court decriminalized abortion, asterisk. You see, here's what happened. Mexico's Supreme Court unanimously ruled on Tuesday that penalizing abortion is unconstitutional, and here's how it works. Basically, it was for a specific case in a specific state, but the ramifications of that case is going to overwhelmingly push for, it's overwhelmingly going to, be a ripple effect for the rest of the country. Much like how Roe v. Wade basically was the ripple effect for the American, for U.S. But this is one thing that was interesting. A lot of people didn't report on the fact that it was a unanimous decision, despite the fact that it was a unanimous decision being very interesting for a number of reasons. For one, obviously, it came after Texas's strict abortion laws, and this state is the state right next to Texas on the map. But another thing is, here are the people, here are the presidential, these are the justices based on presidential appointment. Felipe Calderon appointed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the justices. Vicente Fox appointed 1, Enrique Peña Nieto appointed 2, and AMLO appointed 3. So, if you actually do the numbers, a majority of them are conservative. You know, Calderon and Fox being conservatives. And I would assume the Nieto ones would probably be slightly to the left on social issues. Maybe, I don't know. Now, that's just one thing that really perplexes me. And I wonder why that is. Maybe they do legitimately believe, like, criminalizing abortion is unconstitutional. And maybe it does. But that's also because Mexico's constitution is actually pretty far left if you actually do the digging. Because when it was, like, written, it was written with the idea that it would try to get Emiliano Zapata on board. And, like, the ANCOMs, who were, like, very dominant in the Mexican political scene, on board. It was written with the idea of trying to get them to be on the side of, like, the liberal government. It didn't quite work, but it was definitely a decent attempt. Although AMLO did apparently, I think there were whispers that he was trying to change the constitution, but that's not really here nor there. And the reaction has actually been very interesting. But the worst reaction has been the people who have definitely said words. Like, one of the biggest reactions that I remember seeing, and I was floating around like some left Twitter, it was like, how could a country as backwards as Mexico get this issue right? And it's like, okay then. So yeah, AMLO be representing. I don't know if this wasn't necessarily an AMLO thing, but might as well say it anyways. AMLO representing. Speaking of representing, Roy Cooper, my governor, has also been trying to represent. Roy Cooper vetoed 2 bills on Friday, one geared towards stiffening punishments for people who riot, and another restricting critical race theory from being taught in public schools. His reasoning for, like, doing this is his, like, response. People who commit crimes during riots and other times should be prosecuted, and our laws provide for that. But this legislation is unnecessary and is intending to intimidate and deter people from exercising their constitutional rights to peacefully protest. And in regards to the critical race theory one, he stated this: the legislature should be focused on supporting teachers, helping students recover lost learning, and investing in our public schools. Instead, the bill pushes calculated, conspiracy-laden politics into public education. And, yep, Roy, you're doing a good job. Roy's my boy. That's the thing about Roy Cooper. Like, he's, like, still in that, like, vein of, like, Southern liberal type politics in a similar vein of, like, Terry Sanford. So he still has, like, some very notable good things about him. And I do think that, you know, it's praiseworthy. I can say with confidence, I'm happy that I voted for him. And now transitioning from someone who I did vote for to who I didn't vote for, Joe Biden. Joe Biden has decided to announce some new COVID vaccine mandates. But here's the thing. Asterisks on mandates. See, here's basically Joe Biden's new vaccine mandate. Like, 100 million Americans will now be under this new COVID vaccine requirements. The measure is a vaccine mandate for all federal workers and contractors and businesses that are extremely large. Like, and you might say, oh, he's a vaccine mandate. And conservative Twitter got really mad, and also, you know, left Twitter. But this is the big thing that shows that it's not a mandate. You have the option to opt out and instead get regular testing for your employees. That is not a mandate. That's not a mandate. A mandate is this or nothing. That's what a mandate is. It's just really not that interesting. It's the same. It's similar things that I said that were gonna happen with Joe Biden. Like, I mean, I said it before, I say it again. What we're gonna get is a bunch of, like, things that seem good, but are ultimately not that good. So, yeah, Joe Biden being Joe Biden. And now the last story is coming from a person that I technically started the career of, Andrew Yang. This one is very interesting. Andrew Yang he hasn't announced it yet, but he will announce on October 5th, with his new book, Forward Notes to Future of Our Democracy. he will announce that he is forming a brand new political party and that he no longer identifies as a Democrat. Now, this is one thing that many people are very confused on for a number of reasons. First, why did Andrew Yang build all this clout as a Democrat when he's just going to form a new party? Now, I think that answers itself. He formed and got clout. He didn't intend to do that clout for anything good. He just formed clout. And you can tell this just by who he is. Like Andrew Yang, it's very obvious. Like, he would tell anybody who was on board with him, like, what they wanted to hear. If you wanted to hear right-wing version of UBI when he talked about the freedom dividend, he would tell you that. If you wanted to hear left-wing version of UBI when he talks about the freedom dividend, he'll do that too. There are some times where he literally would change his positions at the smallest push. Like, everybody was like praising Andrew Yang, like, oh, UBI. But then actually a bunch of left-wing creators started looking into his UBI plan and were like, wait, hold on. This is the right-wing version of UBI, which means that your social security and all your benefits will be gone in regards to UBI. And if we watch his interviews that he gives on like Rubin Report and Joe Rogan, he says, yes, that is exactly what the intention is. But then Andrew Yang was like, oh, no, never mind. Nope. I'll change the freedom dividend to something else. It's like, so you changed your policy. Like, this was his like go-to policy. He changed his biggest policy at the slightest drop of a hat. Like, when people pushed against him, he changed his big mainstay policy. That is very suspicious. The fact that he did that is just completely stupid. Way early on in his presidential campaign, the alt-right basically jumped on Andrew Yang and basically tried to push for him as like this big new candidate. And one of the big things that they pushed for him was that he was like some sort of like super anti-Israel candidate. Like, oh yeah, Donald Trump was going to give all this money to Israel. Andrew Yang's going to give all this money to us. And he sort of leaned into that a little bit. Like, because one of the big things is he never really talked about anything else. Because when he talked about something else, he clearly didn't know what he was talking about. His issue, like his candidacy was basically a one-issue candidacy of UBI. Like the freedom dividend, that was his one issue. And when he talked about anything else, he clearly had no clue what he was talking about. And Israel was actually a prime example. Like I said, early on, he kind of leaned into that. Even when he was asked by the New York Times, like, literally, like, do you support X policy in Israel? He said no. Just that, no. But then, Eric Weinstein said, yo, Yang, you're gonna need to do a little something else than no. And then Andrew Yang responded with, oh, I actually, yes, support this policy. And it's like, what? You just gave two completely different answers. It's literally that meme where it's like, well, yes, but actually no. One of the big things he said was like, he was going to continue into the race till the very end until somebody adopted his UBI policy and that he would not endorse any candidate that did not support the freedom dividend. And then endorsed Joe Biden when Bernie was still in the race, and even making up a fake term like, he's our prohibitive nominee. It's like, that doesn't mean anything. It was pretty clear that he was rehearsing a lot of lines. Like, there was one line that I remember to this very day because he said it so much. He's like, I have a wife and 2 kids at home, one of whom's autistic. Like, he could say that line over and over and over again in debates, and it's like, that's stupid, man. You're being... I can tell you rehearsed this. And then people who love Andrew Yang so much would be like, you know who I'm talking about. There's only one person I'm talking about when I say Andrew Yang supporter. All Andrew Yang supporters are this one person, vague, empty, anything, have complete devoid of personality of anything of the sort, and just follow Yang wherever he goes. And another thing is, they literally asked him many times during the presidential campaign, why don't you take it slow, Yang? Why don't you run for, like, mayor of New York, or governor of New York, or senator of New York, or House of Representatives member from New York, or something along those lines, and then build up to a presidential run? And Andrew Yang stated, I don't have time to run for other offices. This is an issue so important that it cannot be addressed on a local level. It has to be addressed on the national stage. and then almost a year later runs for New York City mayor and loses substantially. But here's the big thing. There's one thing that has made the media question whether or not this third party is going to go anywhere. Will he take it nationwide, or will it be a New York thing? Because I am of the belief that if he sticks to New York, maybe this third party could go somewhere. When I say go somewhere, I mean get that one seat and then nothing. Because New York City's electoral fusion laws, I at least the ones that I remember, because they slightly changed them, they allow for these kinds of parties to stick around. The Independence Party of New York is basically a scam. It's basically just devoid of anything, and yet it somehow stays afloat. It'll be something along the lines of that, or maybe the Working Families Party, where they try to pressure incumbents to try and change their positions on certain issues. I would assume UBI. And maybe he'll be a fusion line. But many people also argue, why didn't he just take this momentum and translate it to one of the parties, like Working Families or Serve America Movement or whatever? But of course, it wouldn't be the Yang Party. But at the end of the day, we all know what it is. It's just a way to get Yang back in the headlines. And gosh darn it, he succeeded. So anyways, now that we're off Boring Man, let's move on to the main topic of this video. Something that I said, I have been looking forward to talking about for a little bit now. The Chilean presidential election. Now, for all of the stuff that they have said, pundits and people have been saying about, the Peruvian election, the Bolivian election, the Ecuadorian election, or, maybe to a lesser degree, the Honduras election. For all the stuff that they say about those elections, we need to say this about the Chilean election. This is the true test of if the pink tide has come back. Now, of course, those elections that I have stated before, and more so, were tests and proof of itself. But this one is a very, very big one. And many of you might have already pieced together why that is. And of course, I'm going to set it up for the people who haven't put it together or just generally still want to hear the story. On September 4th, 1970, a man by the name of Salvador Allende was elected president of Chile. His election was very notable because he was the first Marxist to be elected in a liberal democracy in Latin America. And boy, did he not keep that fact a secret. And he tried to advocate very extensively for the people and tried to help the poor people and indigenous people in Chile with their trying to help them get to a position where they could get out of poverty. However, a greedy, obnoxious filth of a man by the name of Richard Nixon was very, very upset at the idea of Allende being president of Chile, because he viewed Allende as a potential new Fidel Castro, and much how Fidel Castro taking over Cuba was seen as a failure of the Kennedy administration, he did not want Chile to be a failure. So Nixon started doing a lot of shady stuff, and mostly embargoes and other things to try and make Chile's economy less prosperous. However, that actually led to Chileans actually getting closer relations with Cuba, to the point where Fidel Castro considered Allende a very close friend and even praised him, saying Allende did something that I didn't think was possible. He accomplished a revolution via the ballot box. However, the embargoes and other economic sanctions that the Nixon administration had done to Chile had made Chileans get in a worse position than they were prior to Allende. And as such, many Chileans got angry. And they were mad at Allende, seeing his, because Allende, of course, his positions would make it so that the economic conditions would worsen before they'd get better. Because usually that's what appears to happen under socialism. When you transition from capitalism to socialism, it makes it appear we're actually losing benefits. But if you stay with us for a little bit longer, 2 minutes, you'll see that this is actually going to help us in the long run. But of course, they didn't care. They wanted immediate retribution. And Nixon wanted that as well. So Nixon went to the Chilean military and basically said, which one of you guys wants to be the leader of Chile? Because if you want to, here's what you gotta do. And then on the day that I am recording this, 48 years ago to this exact day, a man by the name of Augusto Pinochet decided to overthrow the Allende government. And when he overthrew Allende, and Allende committed suicide, he turned Chile from a prosperous liberal democracy to a military dictatorship, where he basically did whatever he wanted. Most prominently, he jailed and/or executed many political dissidents, mostly from the left. His preferred method would be to kidnap them and then take them into helicopters and then toss them over. And as a way to get the US to jump on board with him, he joined up with a bunch of economists who were of the right-wing variety and basically instituted a new form of government, like a new form of economics called neoliberalism, which was basically the most laissez-faire you could possibly get without just being laissez-faire. He instituted a new Chilean constitution and remained in office until 1990. Now, as part of the pink tide, Chile inevitably did get some leftist reforms back. They elected Ricardo Lagos and Michelle Blanchet. But most of the governments that have governed since then was mostly center-right in regards to economics and social issues. And under these new constitutional laws, Chile wasn't able to go as far into leftism as they actually would have wanted to. And for the most part, Chileans sucked it up. Until 2019, when public transport fares were raised, and that was just one thing too many, and Chileans went to protest. Now again, it was supposedly because rise in public transport fares, but as I said before, it just steamrolled. Indigenous communities got involved and wanted their voices heard. A lot of leftists got involved. It was basically a mix of indigenous people, communism, leftism, and a lot of other things. Raising the minimum wage. It was basically to shine a light on the fact that Chile had become capitalist to the point where it's even the middle class can't just give their money and make it happy. A lot of people were injured and a lot of people died. But inevitably, the center-right president, Sebastián Piñera, did make some concessions. He reshuffles the cabinet, he announces some reforms in education and healthcare, but the biggest thing that he did was the 2020 Chilean plebiscite. And basically it was a referendum on whether or not the Chilean people wanted a brand new constitution. An overwhelming 78% said yes. And they wrote it so that in the second question they explain how do you want this to be made? Do you want it to be made by a mixed convention? So I can just appoint whoever I want to, the current government, to write the new constitution? Or do you want to directly elect the people who will write the constitution yourselves? And an overwhelming amount of Chileans wanted to elect the people who would write the constitution. So they did that. And even though the center-right coalition has 37 seats, which is a majority, or a plurality, overwhelmingly, leftists remained in control because the other four major coalitions in that were left-wing or center-left. They will be the ones tasked with writing a brand new constitution. And that is what makes it a little more interesting than before. Because now, the government that will end up happening will not have to govern in the same way that the leftist or center-right people in the Pinochet era of the Constitution, they won't have to govern that way. So if you're a leftist, you actually can go in further, more radical directions, which is what has gotten a lot of people's attention. Now, that's the backstory Now, the race itself, which after all that explanation, does make you understand why this one is really important in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of Chileans appear to be excited about this, because it's like, they can do so much. Like, they could potentially do something amazing, or they can just go same old route. And you will see what I mean as I go over the candidates in the race. Now, as of right now, there are 7 candidates in the race. And 2 are 100% guaranteed to be on the ballot come November. The rest of them will be subjugated to a lot of issues in regards to their candidacies, and one of them has been getting into a lot of issues with their candidacy. To summarize them politically, there are 3 leftists running, 3 right-wingers running, and 1 candidate that's broadly in the center. But that gets a little more confusing when I go into specifics. So let us go into specifics. The first candidacy that I have to mention is one that it is very confusing if he will end up being on the ballot come November or not. Because as I've prepared for this video, he's both gotten off of and gotten back on the ballot. So as you can see, it's a little interesting. The candidate in question is Marco Enriquez Omenami, better known by his initials MEO. He is the candidate of a party by the name of the Progressive Party. It is a democratic, socialist, progressive, environmentalist, feminist party. He has run for the presidency before, but he has only gotten 10% of the vote previously, and this election he does not appear to be doing so hot. So he's not really into the grand scheme of things. He's not really a major player in the race. And another reason for that being is, like I said, he has been having a lot of trouble with his candidacy. He's gotten off of and gotten on the ballot because he served a jail sentence previously, to the point where it was actually unsure if he was going to be able to be on the ballot in the first place. But the fact that he is on the ballot now, past the filing deadline, he is, they're stuck with him, whether they want to or not. But again, there's not much else I could say about him, because he doesn't really have much say in the race. The next candidate is similar. His name is Eduardo Artes. He is the candidate of the political party, the Patriot Union. Now, his party is interesting because he actually is extremely far to the left. Unlike MEO, who is generally still pragmatically center left, I guess. He's just Artes is just full on far left. His party is communist, Marxist-Leninist, anti-imperialist, anti-revisionist, and left-wing nationalist. It is an extremely far left party that praises Maduro and North Korea. He has, I will give him some credit where credit is due. He was one of the earliest people to actually propose, changing the Chilean constitution to, due to the fact that it was written by the Pinochet government. But he is not necessarily making any friends, as he's been calling out a lot of the other supposed left-wing candidates in the race, because, I don't know, he just calls them out because that's his thing. He's the far left, so he has to call out the people who are of the not even center left to a degree. We'll get to him when we get to him. Now shifting to the right, we have Franco Parisi. He is a business engineer and economist who has also run for the president previously. He broadly identifies as a social liberal to a degree, but his party, the Party of the People, is a bit more to the right. It's populist, postmodernist, anti-immigration, anti-globalist. Now, that party itself has actually faced some decent criticisms because it is very vague in regards to a lot of its policies. He is very, it was very perplexing for the most part. They didn't really necessarily know, it's really a catch-all to a degree. To a degree, it's a big tent catch-all party. But to the specific candidate, Parisi, here's one incident that happened with him that is very controversial. A 19-year-old Texas Tech University student accused Parisi of continual sexual harassment during a study trip to Chile organized by him. So, that's something that happened, potentially, allegedly, as far as I can tell. Now, those candidacies are way on the bottom of the tier list. Most people agree that those ones aren't really going to play a larger role in the election. Now, these next two will play a large role, but not in a big sense as far as we know now. First, we're going to start off with Jose Antonio Cast. He is a Chilean lawyer and politician who has served in the Chamber of Deputies for a while. He's running under the coalition, the Christian Social Front, which is, like, I say coalition loosely because there are only two parties in it, and, like, there really is only one that is actually notable, which is the Republican Party, not the one that you think. The Chilean Republican Party. It is a national conservative, social conservative, right-wing populist, anti-communist, anti-immigration subsidiary, which is basically like states' rights, I guess. But the Christian Social Front is a lot more transparent. Like, it is a national conservative, anti-communist, social conservative, right-wing populist party, and has been commonly described as far-right. Now, Cast, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of advertisements depicting Cast as Pinochet. Like, that's what I'm going to guess. They're going to be because Pinochet and Allende, even though they're all long dead, they of course are going to play major parts in the election. Cast, let me explain Cast. Cast has, he supported Jair Bolsonaro. He's, he's a really far-right guy, and has even went so far as to say, I do not like the Pinochet government, but we cannot deny the good things that he has done under that government. You know, he literally did the I'm not racist argument, but for fascism. Look, it's not that bad if you actually look into the... Yes, it is that bad. Cast has previously run for president and got a not-so-distant third, so many people are theorizing that he will play a major part in the race, but we have no clue what it is at this particular moment. The next candidate in the race is Yasna Provoste. She was a Chilean teacher and a Christian Democratic politician who served as minister during the presidencies of Ricardo Lagos and Michelle Bachelet. So, basically, she is the candidate of the center-left coalition, the New Social Pact. Now, here's the thing about that. There's actually a huge amount of interesting stuff that happened during that primary. You see, the primary was originally held with 3 people. It was originally going to be held with 2 people. 2 people openly said that they were going to run for this nomination. Carlos Maldonado of the Radical Party and Paula Navarez of the Socialist Party. And, they were running for the nomination, and it was very confusing on who would run and who would not. Mio was originally in the contention for that party's primary, but then his party decided to go solo. And it was widely expected that other parties who were in the coalition were either going to go solo or sit out of the race, like the Christian Democrats. But the Christian Democrats decided to start campaigning for the nomination. However, Provoste and the Christian Democrats, they entered the campaign a little too late, and they actually, got the primary canceled because Provoste was not on the ballot for the primary. However, Maldonado and Navarez argued that it would make sense for the center-left to mainly stay focused on one candidate rather than be divided amongst those 3, because if they didn't, join one coalition, they would instead be pushed aside. So they made a non-binding primary, basically saying, if Provoste wins, we'll step down. If one of us win, the other 2 will step down. Provoste won, so they decided to stand down. So Provoste, even though she's broadly more centrist to a degree, she's center-left, I guess, a little bit, she will be the candidate of the center-left coalition. However, due to that, her candidacy is actually in a little bit of trouble. And all the candidates that I mentioned before do have one set of uncertainty. Mayo knows very well. Since these candidates all sought the nominations of either one party or formed a coalition or were in a non-binding primary, they can be removed from the ballot at any point. Any of these candidates that I mentioned before, if there's a legitimate concern about how they got on the ballot, they can be done. However, 2 people went through the legitimate process to get on the ballot in their primaries, and they will remain on the ballot 100% no matter what. First, we're going to analyze the right wing. We have Sebastián Sichel. He was the president of the Bank of Chile and then previously served as Minister of Social Development and Family under incumbent President Pinera. Sichel is an independent register, but he decided to seek the nomination of the prominent center-right coalition of Chile, then known as Chile Vamos, but now known as Chile Podemos Más. Now, despite the fact that he was not the front runner for the coalition, he ended up winning, and as such, he will be the center-right's broad candidate in the election. Now, Sichel has controversies due to the fact that he is just broadly seen as another, who's that guy from, the guy that beat, the guy in Ecuador, he's just he's a banker, and one of the things, him becoming the minister of the Bank of Chile was actually because of that cabinet reshuffle. When he reshuffled the cabinet, he pushed Sichel into the bank position, and as he kicked him out of the secretary position, so he basically just got this position as a thank you or something. And that has led to a very large amount of controversy. However, the last candidate doesn't seem to have any controversy of any of the sort, and seems to be very interesting. His name is Gabriel Boric. Boric is a former member of the Chamber of Deputies of Chile and will be the candidate of the left-wing coalition. Now, I say left-wing, not center-left, because there's multiple left-wing groups in Chile, and he represents the broad left-wing coalition Approved Dignity, or Apruebo Dignidad. Now, Boric is actually also interesting because his party, Social Convergence, isn't even a majority in the coalition, because you see, the coalition in this one is actually a mix of 2 coalitions, the Broad Front and Chile Digno. Chile Digno is what's considered the slight majority, and the leader of that coalition, Daniel Jode, was actually expected to win the primary. However, in a huge upset, Boric actually ended up winning the nomination, and that was a huge surprise, especially to Populism Updates, who, again, didn't expect much. In fact, they were actually expecting to jump on the candidacy of another candidate, Pamela Giles, who ended up not seeking the presidency at all. Now, the election is very clearly, many people see as a Boric versus Sichel election. Polls very clearly show in the first round, Boric and Sichel are very obviously going to be the ones that make it to the runoff. And another level of excitement comes from the results of said polling. Boric is usually depicted as the winner of the polls. There is only one poll that he loses in, and there's one poll that he ties with Sichel in the first round. In the second round, the polls actually show Boric easily winning against Sichel, to the point where Sichel only wins one of the polls that has been conducted. However, don't count Sichel out. Sichel has close wins, he has close loss, it's 46-42 Boric, 44-41 Sichel, 48-40 Boric, 31-30 Boric, 44-39 Boric. Boric isn't a shoo-in, but he is very likely to make it to the runoff. In fact, let's look at the polling for the other candidates, shall we? Here's basically all the polling that has been conducted ever since the candidacies have been finalized. Boric easily wins poll 1, conducted in August 24th to 5th, with 21% to Seychelles 20. In another poll conducted around the same time frame, Seychelles wins 26 to Boric's 22. Provoste gets a very close, well, not even very close, like, she gets like around 12% to be the third. Oh no, wait. Cast actually became third in one of those polls. In the poll where Seychelles winning, Cast has 15%, which is a very close, I mean, not even, again, not very close, but I mean, kind of. Somewhat close fourth. The potential upsets would be if either Provoste or Cast make it to the runoff. It is very much guaranteed that Boric or Seychelles are going to make it to the runoff. Potentially both of them. But it is very unlikely that, like, Cast or Provoste. But they do check just in case. They've taken the 4 biggest candidacies, Boric, Seychelles, Provoste, and Cast, and basically just put them together and see who would win hypothetical roundups. Boric and Seychelles, we already went over. Boric easily wins over Provoste, except for one poll conducted in June. Boric easily wins against Cast. And Provoste easily wins against Seychelles. Now, I'm curious to why they didn't put, like, a Cast and Provoste poll. But my guess is maybe it's because, like, if Seychelles is not, like, the right... Like, there isn't really a potential scenario where I see Boric versus Provoste, or Cast versus Seychelles, obviously. The situations that are most likely is one of the candidacies of the right and one of the candidacies of the left gets solidified. And it is very likely that it will be Boric versus Seychelles. And as I stated, that's a very interesting... Like, if the polls are showing what they're showing right now, we could be getting more pink-tide. And personally, I'm excited. I like Boric. I've seen a little bit of Boric, and I'm like, yeah, I can say that this guy's pretty cool. And I'd like to see what he would do with Chile. I'd be excited to see what he does. I'm not seeing any, like, bad things. Like, in fact, he's coming from, like, a libertarian left perspective. So, yeah, I'd 100% like to see what Boric does. I mean, I would have been interested to see what Joe would have done, but, you know, Boric is also pretty cool as well. So I'll say right here, I endorse Gabriel Boric to be president of Chile. Allende, we will avenge you. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you want some more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.